Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to Day 4 of Commander 2015 deck list. So we took a look at the Orzhov deck list, then the next day we came back with the Izzet. Yesterday we took a closer look at the Golgari. Now today is Boros, and tomorrow we'll wrap up this product with the Simic deck. So hopefully once you see these videos you have a better idea of what's in this product and which ones you'd like to buy, which ones you'd like to play with, whether to play as a pre-constructed deck or to use for parts for maybe your existing commander decks. So having said that, we'll do the same thing we did for the last couple of videos. We're going to look at all the cards that are in this deck. We're going to look at the reprints first. The picture of the card you'll see will be the last time it was reprinted in paper, so you have an idea about how old it is. And then we'll talk a little bit about what this deck does, and we'll wrap up by looking at the new cards. There's 15 new cards in each one of these products, including the commander that you see at the front. So much like the last deck we saw, you're going to start seeing some repeats with the new cards. So some of these new cards are being used in multiple decks, and same is true for some of the reprints as well. So now that we've gone over that, let's get started. Let's look at the creatures that were reprinted first for this deck. We have Angel of Serenity, Arbiter of Knoll Ridge, Borderland Behemoth, Dawnglare Invoker, Desolation Giant, Fumiko the Lowblood, Gazella Blade of Gold Knight, Hamletback Goliath, Hammerfist Giant, Hostility, Hunted Dragon, Inferno Titan, Jareth Leonin Titan, Magma Giant, Stink Drinker Daredevil, Stone Shock Giant, Sunrise Sovereign, Sun Titan, Taurian Mauler, Thundercloud Shaman, Victory's Herald. And now let's look at the sorceries. We have a Breath of Daragaz, Disaster Radius, Earthquake, and now Instance, Crib Swap, Fall of the Hammer, Orim's Thunder, and Artifacts, Basalt Monolith, Boros Cluestone, Boros Signet, Cold Steel Heart, Darksteel Ingot, Dreamstone Hedron, Felwar Stone, Lightning Greaves, Loxodon Warhammer, Mindstone, Seer's Sundial, Soul Ring, Staff of Nin, Urza's Incubator, hasn't been reprinted in a very long time, actually never been reprinted, Worn Power Stone, and enchantments. We have Banishing Light, Curse of the Nightly Hunt, Faith's Fetters, Warstorm Surge. And finally we'll look at the lands. Ancient Amphitheater, Blasted Landscape, Boros Garrison, Boros Guildgate, Command Tower, Drifting Meadow, Evolving Wilds, Forgotten Cave, Secluded Steppe, Smoldering Crater, Terramorphic Expanse, Vivid Crag, Vivid Meadow, Wind-Scarred Crag, and then we have our basic lands, 14 mountains, and finally 11 plains. Now that we've seen that, before we get into the new cards, you've seen the reprints, you probably have a good idea what the deck's supposed to do. This is a very intriguing deck to me, and here's why. Typically when you think Boros, you think aggressive. You're going to think small creatures, a lot of maybe like goblins and soldiers, a lot of tokens, just getting in there, giving them like double strike and just trying to overwhelm your opponent going wide. This deck kind of takes all that and throws it out the window, and it basically is a giant deck. It's more of tribal giant, and it's going for big creatures, and it's looking for a lot of ways to protect you and slow down the game. not very Boros-like. So I think that's neat, though. I think it's a really different way to look at Boros, and using a lot of the control elements that you find in white, and even some of the red control direct damage elements that are in there, are going to slow down the game, and they'll do a couple things. They're going to protect you in the early game, but then in the mid game they're also going to let you do things like sweep the board, gain some life, use spot removal to take out a creature, and then in the long game you're just basically supposed to run away with it with huge unstoppable powerhouse creatures. So having said that, let's look at the brand new cards for this deck. The first one is Anya, Merciless Angel. So much like the other commander decks, there's 3 legendary creatures that could be used as your commander. There's the one kind of suggested one, which uses the experience counters we'll look at in a moment. Then there's another new one, and then there's always a reprinted one as well. So let's look closely at Anya for just a second. Now, she costs 5 for a 4/4 flyer. Okay, that's all right. But it's very interesting, her effect, that as players start to go down to less than half their life total, she gets stronger and gains indestructible. Now, it's an interesting balancing act, though, because if one of those players leaves the game, then she could potentially get smaller and lose her indestructibility. So you kind of start playing this weird sort of side game of trying to keep people low on life but still alive, for her to continue to be as strong as she is, until the point where it probably just plain doesn't matter anymore, and you get out just a whole bunch of big trample creatures out on the board. So interesting design here. I actually really like this card. I just think it's designed very elegantly for commander. Next is Blade of Selves, and this is equipment that's going to give a creature Myriad. I think Myriad's strong enough that you're going to see folks using these cards in their homebrewed commander decks as opposed to just using it in these constructed decks. So that's pretty cool, and I think this card could definitely see some play in the real world of commander aside from just this product. Dawnbreak Reclaimer. This one I'm not super thrilled about. Here's the issue for me. Costs 6 for a 5/5 flyer. I mean, that's okay. It's not super great. Now, the ability can be good, and basically when she comes into play, you get to name a card, and an target opponent gets to name a card, and if you like what you named compared to what they named, then at that point you're allowed to each take that card out of your graveyard and put it into the battlefield. But if they have something that they chose a card that you really don't want them to have in play, then you have to give up taking yours out of the graveyard as well. Now, in a multiplayer game, there's a lot of cases where you can choose someone who really doesn't have anything threatening in their graveyard, and then you're going to get value. But this card, as you can see already, is starting to become conditional. It's good some of the time, but maybe in the long game, when you're down to just you and one other opponent, it all of a sudden becomes not very good at all, and almost becomes a dead draw, perhaps. Or, at the very least, just a 5/5 flyer for 6, which at that point might not be enough to really do anything. So, I don't know. It is what it is, I guess. It's fine. I do like the design. I kind of like where they're going with it, but it's not one that's super exciting for me. Next is Dream Pillager, and again, you're spending a lot of mana for 4/4 flyer this time, but you do get some card advantage. Now, it's red card advantage. You have to use the cards pretty much right away, so this is more of a late game play, but when you do get it late game, it's going to feel real good. You're going to get extra cards off of it, hopefully, and you'll be able to play them. Now, I did find it a little odd that you're able to cast non-land cards. I felt like the least they could have done at this point is let you play one of the lands that you draw. So, I don't know. I'm not really sure why they went with non-land here. I've seen this ability before, obviously, where you're allowed to choose a land and put it into play as well. And it's part of your land count, of course, but it is what it is. So, again, this is not going to feel great when you draw early game or even sometimes mid game, but in the late game, this guy can do some work. Next is Fiery Confluence, and I love these confluences, and this is actually the cheapest one we've seen. This one only costs 4 as opposed to 5 converted mana cost, so I think it's still too expensive for Legacy because it's too red and too colorless, and this one's maybe not quite as strong as some of the others we saw, but it's still very good. I just love the fact that you can triple up on some of these modes if you want to, or do one of each, or 2 of one and 1 of another. There's just so much versatility. It just makes this card so good. All these confluences will definitely see play aside from these constructed decks. Nexus Herald of the Host. We took a look at this one in the Orzhov deck. It's back in this one. It's pretty cool. Cool commander card. I mean, you got Serra Angel with upside. What's not to love? So, Serra Angel that can attack everybody if you wanted to. That's pretty cool. And only costs 5. These are the type of cards that are just fun to play in Commander or in cube formats that, unfortunately, you know, won't see play in like any sort of constructed deck formats like Vintage or Legacy, or even if this was Standard playable, you probably wouldn't see it in Standard, obviously, but you definitely are going to see this get some play outside of this product in Commander. Kelmans, Disciple of Erois. Now, this is the official Commander, and she's a powerhouse. Now, when she was originally leaked, a lot of people felt she was underpowered, but I don't know. I just never saw it. I mean, she costs 4. Yeah, 3/3 double strike vigilance. Okay, those are fine stats. But just the fact that as you start building your big creatures and putting your big creatures on the board, then she gets bigger through the experience counter system, and then next time you play her, she's even bigger, and it just gets really cool, I think. I mean, she gets these +1/+1 for all your experience counters. It doesn't take many before she becomes very difficult to deal with. I mean, a 4/4 double strike vigilance, a 5/5 double strike vigilance, this gets pretty crazy pretty quick, and I really like her a lot. I think she's one of the kind of more simple commanders maybe that they've made for this product, but at the same time she can do a lot of work. What's also interesting is I think of her as more classic Boros. She's a little bit smaller, but she's got double strike and she's got vigilance. She's attack. So the commander is kind of the classic idea of what Boros does, but the rest of the deck really isn't, so I think that's cool. Kelmans Captain, and this one's interesting to me. It's not super big, but it does have the monstrosity effect that can make it larger. It has vigilance, but doesn't really have evasion. And then you exile all artifacts and enchantments if you monstrous this. So I find that a little strange, just because this deck is relying a lot on artifacts to get its mana. So obviously in the late game and you have your land out, then this might not matter. If you monstrous this, you're probably still fine. You're probably hopefully doing more damage to your opponent than you are to you. But I find this a little weird. There's going to be times where you're not going to want to monstrosity this, which feels a little strange. Magus of the Wheel. So you got Wheel of Fortune stuck to a creature, and that's never a bad thing. So the only thing you do have to keep in mind is you're going to be drawing a lot of cards. Your opponents are going to be drawing a lot of cards, but you're going to be drawing a lot of expensive cards. So this feels a little out of whack here for me. I think it makes more sense maybe in like the Izzet deck, but here, I don't know. I'm going to draw 7 new cards, and maybe I get a land and maybe a mana trinket, and then 5 just giant creatures. So how much can I really do? I feel like my opponents might be able to put more down on the board and enhance their board state faster than I can enhance my board state. Now in a multiplayer game, that's not the end of the world, because it's not like they can just tap out and attack in. You're going to also be able to maybe play this as a little political game for people that might want to draw some cards. And also, you can maybe make some players discard some hands that you're concerned about. So it definitely has its use. It's not a bad card by any means, and Wheel of Fortune is a great card, but it just feels a little out of place in this deck. Meteor Blast, and here's just some direct damage for you. Again, this has appeared in other decks, but this one is just going to help you take care of a lot of the small creatures. It doesn't cost super lot. It is 3 red and then X, but in the mid game you should be able to play this and hopefully clear out some early threats before you start putting out your big creatures. Marascos Explorer, and this is a grizzly bear with upside. I love these cards that play off the land tax ability. Land tax is a very powerful card, and granted, these creatures that kind of play off that ability are never as powerful, nor should they be. Land tax was broken, but this is pretty cool. It just helps you make sure you don't miss land drops, and it starts to thin your deck a little bit of lands, and even if just a little, it can be helpful in the long run, so I do like cards like this. Rite of the Raging Storm. Here's another one that I just think is interesting commander design. I really like it. So I like the fact that basically this enchantment sits there and gives your opponent, at least for one turn, 5/1 trample haste creatures, and they can attack you with them. So they're up. They have a decision now to make, that they either do nothing with it or they attack in, because they really got nothing to lose if they attack with it. They start attacking other players. I just think that's funny to me. I love this design. I hope we see more stuff like this in the future. Sandstone Oracle. This is just a good kind of workhorse card for you. Paying 7 for a 4/4 flyer doesn't feel good, but even if you draw a couple cards off this, it all of a sudden becomes decent. So it's not an exciting, flashy card, but it can do some work. If it's going to give you some card advantage and some board presence, there's definitely nothing wrong with that. Thought Vessel, and this is the mana trinket that's been included in all the decks, and the no maximum hand size probably won't apply very much in this deck. It really seems like the only deck that wants that is the Izzet deck, but it is a mana trinket, so that's going to work well for you. And finally, last one is Warchief, and this is a giant warrior 5/3 with haste and myriad, so it can attack in. It's a little fragile with 3 toughness, it's going to be easy to destroy it, but the haste maybe allows it to get some damage in, and myriad also makes for some interesting gameplay and decision making, so I do like this as well. And this makes a lot more sense in this deck than when we saw it previously, so I'm happy that it's here. And having said that, that's the Boros deck. Overall, I think it's a pretty cool deck. It's gonna play very differently than some of the others. It makes me wonder like how it would go up against, say, the Izzet deck, which is going to move a lot faster, or even the Simic deck, which we'll look at tomorrow, which will probably move a little faster as well. This is a interesting deck that's just trying to slow down the game and grind it out to the point where it can start playing its huge threats. So it's a fun deck to play, I think, but there's also a little bit of strategy here that it might be difficult for newer players to get into this deck, quite honestly. It might be a little harder to play than some of the others. So having said that, tell me what you think in the comments below if you like this one, what you think of the products in general, and as always, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day.
Hey, thanks as always for watching. This video, like all my videos, was made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Even a donation of $1 helps me to keep growing this community and creating better quality videos for all of you. Check out our Patreon page for exclusive giveaways and future goals for the channel. If you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the MTG news, spoilers, set reviews, product openings, or finance videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a good day.